Emma, I don't know if you were going to do it, but could you just give a general background on like the WRC and process
Mhm.
too?
Yeah, so this is me and Sean's second year running the WRC, but SALT has been on campus for um, quite a few years now. In the spring, I mean, in the fall, we spend some time working on different groups. Students will choose different, we call them passions, and they'll spend time like researching and then potentially doing mini fundraisers. One of our groups did this year, like putting on some sort of event to raise awareness for that cause. And then in the spring, we do our WRC. Last year, we raised about $8,000 for Gabriel's Horn. And then 2 years ago, we raised about 10, I believe, for the Community Change Center. So that's kind of roughly where we've been the past few years. So yeah.
Okay. I am familiar with what you do, um, simply because I know some people and hear things and
Yeah,
good.
and one change that's happened the last couple of years, Paul, is instead of a project grant where it's set commitment to raise, I think it used to be like $20,000, $25,000, and the organization would have to propose what they do with that. We've moved a little back towards like choosing an organization to raise funds for, knowing that we didn't want to commit to an amount that we couldn't necessarily raise anymore with a smaller number of people too. So
Sure.
been a little bit of a change in that. So we're raising funds for the nonprofit, not necessarily for a specific project.
Okay.
Could you tell us a little bit more about like your connection with the organization?
Well, my connection is that I am their executive director, and that is a bit of a misnomer because you think of a person who wears a suit and a tie and works in an office. It's a small organization, so I'm the director from top to bottom. I do cleanup work and I write grants. I work on the job site when we're building houses. Um, I was a volunteer starting in 1991, existed in that status for 10 or 12 years, became the president of the board. Um, and 10 years ago, I retired from my day job, you might say, and was hired to be the part-time executive director of Project Neighbors, and have held that job ever since.
Oh,
Paul, could you just give us a little more background on just, you said you started volunteering in 91, but could you give us a little more background on the organization and tell us kind of some of the impacts that the organization has had through the years and maybe more so currently?
Well, Project Neighbors, as you probably know the story, started in 1968, 69. I was a student at the university and was oblivious to all that happened in that period because I was preoccupied with growing up and getting passing grades and that kind of stuff. But in 1968, Walt Reiner, the founder of the organization, was running the urban studies VU program in Chicago and became acquainted with a young single mom, African American, who was a church secretary. And as Walt was phasing out of that and preparing to move back to Valpo, she said to him, I wish I could move there where my kids would be safe and free from the crime of uh, Cabrini Green, where she lived. He responded she'd be crazy to move to Valpo because at the time there really weren't any permanent African Americans living here. Um, she was crazy. They couldn't rent a house. They couldn't buy a house. So they built a house on available property right next to Walt's house. And that was the beginning of what eventually became Project Neighbors. And it was an effort to, um, it was an effort to respond to people who said help. In this particular case, it was a Chicago-based African American single mom with 6 kids, but it wasn't a deliberate effort to integrate. It wasn't a deliberate effort to do anything to Valparaiso. It was an effort to respond to the cries of a neighbor for help. Um, Project Neighbors has done a lot of different things over the years. but housing has remained a centerpiece of that activity. And that's mainly what I did in the last 11 years as the executive director, was build as much housing as I could and put families in it at about half of market rate. So if a typical rent is $1,800, we would move someone into a new house for $900. And frankly, that's much higher than we aspired to. But the last 5 years have seen an astronomical increase in both costs of materials, land, and obviously interest rates.
Thank you.
I'm Sean. Like Emma said, we run SALT together, and we're just wondering, can you explain like the overall structure of Project Neighbors? Like you're obviously doing a great job as the executive director, but how does it run from like day to day? You know, who else are you working with?
Okay, for the past 10 years, we've had a board of directors. The board of directors consisted of 15 or 18 people, many of them VU profs. I could throw names out, but I would undoubtedly leave somebody out. But for years, they were the foundation, mainly members of the theology department. But they've aged out over the years. Heath Carter was a member of our board. He's no longer at VU. He's now in an Ivy League school out east. Ivan Bodensteiner, who was a law school prof, was our president of our board recently. Matt Puffer, who teaches
Christ College.
He's not a coach. He's in. Oh, come on!
He's in Christ College, right?
College. That's what I was thinking of. Anyway, I'm rattling off names. I knew I would forget some people. There's others. Liz Werfel, who left after last year, is still on our board, even though she's doing it from the West Coast. So the structure consisted of those people on the board of directors. We had a part-time bookkeeper who kind of ran our office a couple of days of the week. I was the executive director. Greg Jones, who was a VU theology prof, did some community organizing for us. And recently we have hired someone to replace the hands-on construction work that I've done, a relatively recent VU graduate. And we are in the process of hiring an executive director to do that part of my job. And she is another relatively recent VU graduate. So the organization is small, but I really have left out an awful lot of people because we depend greatly on community volunteers to basically do the work of creating this very, very affordable housing. So on a typical workday, we'll have somewhere between 5 and 10, typically retired people working, but on certain occasions, particularly on Saturdays, and when a particular group is available during the week, we'll have upwards to 30 volunteers, not doing construction work so much because that's pretty challenging with that many people, but landscaping, demolition work, moving materials. Many, many VU groups have come out and done work for us. I remember last year the VU girls volleyball team was going to work for us, and I didn't give it a whole lot of thought. So I selected a site that I thought needed a lot of handwork, just cleaning up a yard. And I think there were 17 6-foot+ tall young women who came out, who in about 45 minutes knocked out all the work that I had hoped to accomplish in 4 hours. I was really impressed. So part of the organization is me and the board and the staff, but really it's the community that comes and does an awful lot of the work.
Thank you. What does your organization's budget look like? Is fundraising a big part of your annual funding, or how does that look?
We bring in about $300,000 a year in rents because we own a lot of property. Now, we have mortgages on most of those, so a lot of that money goes right back out. We bring in upwards to a couple $100,000 a year in contributions, which really pays for the overhead. And it pays for, like the last house we built, the land cost $25,000. We did not make that a part of the cost. We just paid for it. We ate it, in effect. We are embarking on a very, very large project. Let me back up a little bit. When we build a single family house, we go to the bank and borrow what it's going to take to buy all the materials. Then after it's done, that turns into a mortgage, and that basically defines the rent we have to charge. When interest rates were low, we were renting a brand new 3-bedroom house for $550 or $600 a month, which is dramatically below market. Now we're up closer to $850 or $900 because of the increase in interest rates. We are about to start a job that's going to be between $1.3 and $1.5 million. For that, we are doing substantial fundraising. We were awarded $700,000 of Porter County ARPA funds. Are you familiar with ARPA?
No.
It's a federal grant that the Biden administration created called American Rescue Plan. And it came at the heels of the COVID epidemic. And lots of organizations were struggling, and lots of people were struggling. So Porter County got $35.5 million and doled it out to a number of different organizations. And we were fortunate to get $700,000, which basically empowered us to go after this very, very large project. The large project is to do something that we've done twice before. Twice before, we created small studio apartments for single women. In other words, if you're living on Social Security disability insurance, or if you have a part-time low-paying job, you can get permanent housing from us for somewhere between $420 and $500 a month with everything included. And these apartments are 300 square feet with a full bath and a kitchenette. We did it once and were advised by the neighborhood that they didn't want men living there. So we made it exclusively for women. And then we did it again in collaboration with another organization called Housing Opportunities and created another 15 units. There were 18 in the first. And again, we were advised that they didn't want men living there. For the two men in the room, we should all be ashamed of our reputations because apparently we don't fare as well as women do. And then some individuals have been pushing me to do the same thing for men. So we are now building a 24-unit studio apartment building. We've secured land. We've got drawings. We're ready to go. We just don't have all the money. And that is our next biggest project. Did that answer your question?
Yes, I did.
Hey, I printed out the older document. What can you have Shauna do the next question? Because I'm not sure which one you have next on your list.
So obviously, Project Neighbor sounds like a great organization. But give us a brief pitch as to why we should partner with the organization. And then we can kind of, either show this to our other general members. And so then they can get like a good idea because they aren't sitting in on on this Zoom meeting, but we want them to,
Sure.
hear what you have to say.
Why should you partner with us? Well, there's a bunch of reasons. One is I firmly believe that as large as the world is, and as insignificant as individuals can feel themselves to be, if we work in our local communities, we can do amazing things. And I could spend the rest of this hour talking about the the seismic change that has happened to families that we have provided housing for. Families that were living with 4 kids in 2 rooms and paying $1,000 a month, and now they're living in a house that has 3 bedrooms, that doesn't have any problems, that is fully maintained by us. Their lives have been changed. Um, there was a, a family that moved to Valparaiso, I'm going to guess 30 years ago now, that I just bumped into because I was building a house and I hired the guy to do the roofing. And eventually he moved into one of our duplexes. His son graduated from Valparaiso University a couple years ago. Not a prayer of that happening had he not been embraced by this community and the opportunity to live frugally in below market housing. So I believe in the idea of acting locally. I think it empowers us to have a long-term commitment to improving a community. The second reason is you guys can be involved in our projects. We're right here. If one day I was doing a project to create something called Caroline's Place, which was a 15-unit studio apartment building. And I had 65 Valparaiso University students working on that project. It was the worst day of my life. I ran around with the first aid kit, just hoping nobody got hurt bad. That's too many people. But the point is, we can have a relationship, and not just a financial relationship. We can have a hands-on, person-to-person relationship. So that would be my second reason. My third reason is we are going to do for men what we have done for women in this community. There are no longer women sleeping on church floors, homeless women. They are all housed in permanent affordable housing. We still have men sleeping on church floors. That's going to go away after about a year, because the dilemma isn't that there aren't enough resources for poor people to find housing. There are not enough affordable housing units in this community. And I could spend the rest of the hour talking about that. But I won't, because it's statistics and it's kind of boring. Suffice it to say that the industry that provides housing does not cater to low-income people. In 1950, the typical new house was 950 square feet. In 2024, the typical new house was about 2,500 square feet. That's 2.5 times larger. So we just don't build the basic, simple, economical stuff that we used to build. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. I won't go into that. But we are one of the only, I think there's only 3 organizations that, and these are all not-for-profits, that provide that kind of housing. Housing Opportunities, Habitat for Humanity, and Project Neighbors. We think we do a really good job of that. And I think that VU could benefit directly and indirectly from our continuing to be successful in that.
Great, thank you. I'll take the next question. That's good.
Sure.
So we talked about the range of money that we've been able to raise the last couple of years, around $8,000 to $10,000. And we're just curious how specifically that range might be used, or what would that have been a benefit for you? It doesn't have to be a project, but just how might you see that helping you all?
Well, we're at a turning point. I ran this organization as a volunteer for almost 10 years. And then I ran it as a hired executive director for a little more than 10 years at a very moderate compensation. So our overhead has been very, very manageable. The wisdom of the board of directors indicated that we need to hire 2 full-time people to replace me. I'm flattered by that. I'm not going to comment on that, but the fact of the matter is, if you really want to have an impact in a community, you have to do the work full time. You have to have competent leadership. Well, we've made a commitment to that. We haven't, unfortunately, put together the resources to do it. So certainly your contribution, given the fact that it's not earmarked for a specific project, will go into the pot that will support our efforts by supporting our overhead. We have hired 2 very talented people, and I see the opportunity to do more in our community because of the expanded leadership. So, you empower us to continue to grow and to have a greater impact in the community. That's I think the indirect benefit. The direct benefit is that we're going to build this major project, and we need every penny we can get.
Great. Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else that you'd like us to know that maybe we didn't ask about that you think would be helpful towards our decision process?
Well, I would ask that we stay in contact, win or lose, because it sounds like you have an organization that has a heart for this kind of work, and I would love to see you all out on a job site. Which just means you got to give. I mean, Emma, I have your email address. I will add it to my general list.
Oh, perfect.
And when we do projects, we send out updates every week so people know when they can volunteer. And I know VU students are busy, but this has been life-changing for some volunteers who come and see what they, with a few other people, can accomplish in a local community. So I will write myself a note as soon as we get off, because Emma's a name I can remember, even though I generally can't remember any names. And I'll put you on that list, and you'll get updates periodically.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Paul, do you have any questions for us as far as our process? I know Emma talked about it a little bit. Do you have any questions around the process or moving forward?
I've been around the block.
Sounds good.
I'm good. I'm just gonna, I'm busy, so I'm not gonna think about this. If good news comes my way, I'll celebrate. If it doesn't, I'm busy. I'll keep moving.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right.
Emma, do you have anything else?
No, I think that's it. Thank you so much for talking with us.
You're welcome. See y'all.
Thank you. Nice seeing you.
Bye.
Go ahead and stop the recording.